ever think about what it'd be like to, like, give your whole life to something, a movement, and then see it kind of drift after your partner's gone? That's kind of the road we're going down today, taking a deep dive into the life of Amélie Gabrielle Boudet.
Yeah.
You probably know her as Madame Kardec, Allan Kardec's wife.
Right.
But we've got this really great entry from a Spiritist encyclopedia all about her, and I think you'd be surprised. It goes way beyond just Spiritism.
It really does.
Like, we're talking about a woman who was already breaking barriers back in the 1800s.
Absolutely. Long before women had the opportunities they have today.
Yeah.
It is fascinating how often Madame Kardec's own story gets overshadowed.
Is, right.
She was a remarkable woman in her own right, even before we enter the Spiritist era of her life.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in Allan Kardec's role, but she was there, like, every step of the way. So let's rewind a bit. Amélie was born in 1795, right smack in the middle of the French Revolution.
Oh, wow. Imagine being born during that era. France was completely transformed. I mean, politically, socially, everything.
Right.
Makes you think about how that environment might have shaped her worldview, her character.
Oh, totally. And then on top of that, she's trained as a teacher, using the Pestalozzian method.
Oh, interesting.
Which, for anyone listening who's not familiar, that was like a really progressive approach to education for the time.
Yeah.
Like hands-on learning, developing the whole child, not just rote memorization.
Yeah.
Oh, and she was a talented artist, too. Talk about well-rounded.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, this is the early 1800s.
Yeah.
For a woman to be involved in education, to be pursuing art, that was not exactly the norm.
No, not at all.
She was already, breaking those societal expectations really early on.
Ahead of her time, for sure. And it didn't stop there. She and her husband, Hippolyte, who later became known as Allan Kardec, right, they co-founded a school together.
Wow.
So it's clear education wasn't just a job for her. It was a real passion, something she believed in deeply.
Absolutely. I mean, founding a school was a bold move for anyone in those days, let alone a woman.
Exactly. So here we have this, like, independent, forward-thinking woman, and then Spiritism enters the picture. I mean, how do you think all that background might have prepared her for what was to come?
That's a great question. Because you have to remember, Spiritism, with its focus on communicating with spirits, understanding the spiritual world, that was radical for its time.
Oh, yeah.
Challenging conventional religious and scientific thinking. Perhaps Amélie's own, unconventional path, her open-mindedness, made her more receptive to these new ideas.
Yeah, maybe those early experiences like social upheaval, pushing boundaries in education, maybe that gave her the courage to embrace something as different as Spiritism.
Could be. And she didn't just observe from the sidelines either. She was an active participant right from the start.
Right. Like she's at those early seances with the table turning, where people are gathered around a table and it supposedly moves, reacts to spirits.
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't heard of that, imagine a group of people sitting around a table, hands lightly resting on it. And suddenly, the table starts tilting, spinning, sometimes even levitating.
Wild.
It was one of the things that really sparked the whole Spiritist movement.
And these weren't just happening in some, like, spooky basement somewhere. She's hosting them in her own home.
Think about that for a minute, the social implications. To be holding these seances, even before there was a formal Spiritist society. That was a statement.
Yeah.
Going against the grain. Big time.
Big time. Makes me wonder about her relationship with her husband. This wasn't just his passion project.
Oh, absolutely not.
This was theirs, together.
It was a shared mission. In fact, Allan Kardec himself, in the Spiritist Review, acknowledged her essential contributions.
Oh, really?
Calling her his faithful companion and recognizing the sacrifices she made for their shared cause. Really speaks volumes about their partnership, doesn't it?
Yes.
Makes you think, what does it take to really support someone's dream, especially when it's as out there and challenging as this was?
A lot of courage, I think. Open-mindedness, willingness to, like, step outside what everyone else is doing,
Right.
And you really have to believe in it just as much as your partner does.
Totally agree. And as we dig deeper into Madame Kardec's life, we see all of that, those qualities shining through, especially when things get tough. Because this is where things take a bit of a turn.
Okay.
Allan Kardec passes away in 1869, leaving Madame Kardec at 74 years old, a widow.
Wow.
Now, most people at that age, they might think about taking it easy,
Yeah.
enjoying their later years, right?
Right.
But not Madame Kardec. No, instead of retreating, she steps up,
Really?
determined to make sure her husband's work continues.
I can't even imagine having that kind of energy at that age.
I know, it's amazing.
What does she do?
So she founded a company, the Society Anonyme Spirit. And this wasn't just a social club or anything. This was a structured organization with the specific goal of publishing and distributing Allan Kardec's work.
Wow. So she's creating a framework, like, to keep his teachings alive.
Exactly, making them accessible.
That's pretty incredible. She was a businesswoman on top of everything else.
She was. It's like she's trying to, systematize things, make sure Spiritism has this solid foundation to grow on.
Yeah.
But leading a movement like this, especially in those times, it doesn't come without challenges, right?
Oh, for sure.
And one of the biggest was the spirit photography scandal.
Oh, yeah. Those photographs supposedly showing images of spirits, I mean, that was huge back then.
Was.
But how did that become a problem for Spiritism?
Well, the problem was a lot of those photos were fake.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a key figure in the Spiritist movement, Pierre-Gaëtan Lemery, he got caught up in it all.
Oh, no. Lemery, he was close to the Kardecs, wasn't he?
Very close. He even directed the Spiritist Review for a while.
Wow. And he was promoting these fake photos. Why would he do that?
It seems he genuinely believed they were real. You have to remember, this is a time when people are really wrestling with the idea of communicating with spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And photography was still pretty new, too.
Yeah.
So it's easy to see how someone might get carried away, overlook the possibility of fraud.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I bet the fallout from that was not good.
You're right about that. It was a huge scandal. There was a very public trial in 1875, and the media just had a field day mocking Spiritism and anyone involved.
Oh, man.
And the whole thing, the trial, it wasn't just seen as an attack on the individuals involved. It was an attack on Spiritism itself.
Wow. And Madame Kardec is right in the middle of all this.
Imagine this. She's in her 80s at this point, forced to testify at this highly publicized trial, defending a movement that's being ridiculed and accused of fraud.
Oh, my gosh.
The stress must have been incredible.
I can't even imagine. That's a lot to handle at any age, let alone in your 80s.
But she didn't back down, did she? No, she did not. And this brings us to another really fascinating aspect of her story, and that's her strength when facing challenges within the movement itself.
Okay.
Because Lemery, even after this whole scandal, he continues to cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
He starts drifting towards other doctrines, teachings that differed from the core principles of Spiritism as codified by Allan Kardec.
So not only is Spiritism facing public scrutiny and ridicule, but now there's internal divisions?
Exactly.
It must have felt like the whole thing was falling apart.
It was a very difficult time. And you have to remember, Madame Kardec is in her 80s now,
right?
Relying on others to help manage things. It's a delicate position to be in, you know?
Yeah.
Trying to maintain unity, uphold her husband's legacy, while also dealing with these internal disagreements.
Like fighting battles on two fronts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about how she managed to hold it all together. Did she just let Lemery go his own way?
That's what I was wondering.
Well, not exactly. This is where another remarkable woman enters the picture. Bertha Frobot. She was a close friend, a confidant of Madame Kardec.
Mm-hmm.
And when Lemery starts promoting these different teachings,
Yeah.
Frobot, she publicly challenges him. And she has Madame Kardec's full support.
It's amazing how these women, they supported each other, especially in a time when women's voices weren't always heard or respected.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
It sounded like they were determined to protect the integrity of Spiritism as they understood it.
Absolutely. They were a force to be reckoned with. But even the strongest individuals, they have their limits, right?
Yeah.
In 1883, Madame Kardec passes away at the age of 87. Bertha Frobot actually left a really detailed account of her passing, describing how she stayed true to her beliefs, to her principles, until the very end.
That's powerful. It must have been a huge loss for the whole Spiritist community. But what about her legacy? How is she remembered today? Is she just Allan Kardec's wife, or is there more to it?
It's a great question, and I think her story really shows us that even within larger movements, individuals have their own journeys, their own complexities. Madame Kardec, she was a teacher, an artist, a staunch supporter, and leader in her own right.
Yeah, she was a remarkable person, that's for sure. It makes you think about all the things she faced, you know, the decisions she had to make, how it all shaped Spiritism.
Absolutely. We often get caught up in the big names and dates in history, but it's really those individual choices, the actions of people like Madame Kardec that make things happen.
Mm-hmm. We talked about her role in the Society Anonyme Spirit and dealing with the spirit photography scandal, and then Le Marie and his doctrinal shifts.
Right.
I'm curious about those. What were those teachings that caused such a rift?
So Le Marie, he started incorporating elements of reincarnation into his understanding of Spiritism,
Okay.
which at that time was a pretty big departure from what Allan Kardec had laid out.
Yeah.
See, Kardec, his focus was on progressive spiritual development through multiple lives, but without explicitly saying this is reincarnation, the way we understand it today. Le Marie's teachings, they kind of blurred those lines, and that caused a lot of confusion and concern among Spiritists who saw it as a move away from those original principles.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like a real clash of ideologies, a fundamental disagreement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, Madame Kardec was dedicated to her husband's work. I mean, she saw it as her duty to protect his legacy, make sure his teachings were preserved. So Le Marie's divergence, that must have been incredibly frustrating for her, a real challenge to navigate.
Especially with her age and relying on others to help lead the movement. It's really amazing she could confront these challenges head on like that.
It is. And her story brings up some thought-provoking questions for us all, I think. What does it mean to uphold a legacy, especially as times change and interpretations evolve? How do you stay true to the core ideas while also making space for growth, for adaptation?
Those are some deep questions for sure. It's like we're always trying to find that sweet spot between honoring the past and moving forward,
I think you're right. That tension is real, and it's something that Madame Kardec's story really highlights. I mean, she was rooted in those principles of Spiritism, as codified by Allan Kardec, but she was also living in a world that was constantly shifting, always throwing new ideas and challenges her way.
It makes you wonder, what would she think about Spiritism today, with all its different branches and interpretations?
Right.
Would she see it as a natural progression of her husband's work, or be worried about some of the changes?
Well, we can't know for sure, obviously.
Yeah.
But I do think her life gives us some hints. She was a woman of strong principles, committed to those core tenets as she understood them. But she was also adaptable, ready to meet those challenges, make those tough decisions, to protect the movement she believed in so strongly.
So maybe she'd be open to the diversity of thought within Spiritism today, while still emphasizing those key principles.
Maybe so. Maybe so. What do you think?
It's definitely worth thinking about, and I think it's something we all grapple with, no matter what we believe or who we're affiliated with. How do we stay true to our values while still navigating a world that's constantly changing around us?
Exactly. Exactly. And that, I think, is one of the most important things we can take away from this deep dive into Madame Kardec's life. Her story, it's not just about Spiritism, it's about courage, resilience, that enduring human spirit, face those challenges, adapt to change, while holding on to what we believe in.
Well said. And I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the life of Amélie Gabrielle Boudet, a woman who was so much more than just Allan Kardec's wife.
Right.
A teacher, an artist, a supporter, a leader, a true pioneer. Her story shows that even within the big events of history, it's the lives of individuals like her that really make the difference.
They really do.
And if you're interested in learning more, I'd encourage you to go deeper into Madame Kardec's life, explore the history of Spiritism, and see how her legacy is still inspiring people all over the world.
It's a fascinating journey.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that spirit of discovery alive.